This is Dateline News and Conversation. Oh my God. Trump meets with Netanyahu. They're on all of the television channels in this press conference. And Trump, I don't know if he was drunk, he was on something or what, but he announces that Gaza is a demolition zone and he's going to therefore annex it, take it over. He's going to relocate 1.8 million Palestinians to Egypt and Jordan, friendly countries, build them nice, comfortable homes so they'll be safe. And then he and his son in law, Jared Kushner, are going to demolish the place and build a Trump like Riviera resort on the Mediterranean. My guest tonight is Dimitri Lascaris. He's an activist. He's an author. He's a lawyer. He's an incredible podcaster. Is back tonight. Dimitri, welcome back.
Thank you for the kind words, brother. Nice to be back.
All right, I know you must have had some visceral reactions to that press conference with Bibi smiling like a Cheshire cat. What are your thoughts to open this up?
Let's step back to the Biden administration, and you can find reports from October 2023. I shared a couple on social media. So this would have been within weeks of the October 7th attacks and the commencement of this genocide, where the press was reporting that the Biden administration was trying to pressure Sisi into allowing the expulsion of the people of Gaza into the Sinai Desert. So the program, the objective has been the same from the very beginning. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine is a bipartisan initiative. It's important for us to start with that acknowledgement. The difference between Trump and the Biden administration is that Trump doesn't have any apparent interest in concealing or embellishing his intentions. I mean, I guess in one way he is trying to embellish them in the sense that he's making it sound like a humanitarian gesture. You know, he keeps saying Gaza has been demolished. No one should have to live amongst these conditions, but he never acknowledges that the demolition happened with U.S. bombs, dropped upon Gaza in enormous quantities by a U.S. proxy. So it is the United States which is responsible for the demolition of Gaza ultimately, and it therefore has the ultimate responsibility to restore Gaza and to pay reparations to the Palestinian people. But the Biden administration was equally indifferent to that, moral truth. It's just that they were a bit more deceptive in terms of their intentions. What really ultimately strikes me about this, though, Regis, I mean, of course, any decent-minded person, anyone who cares about international law, anyone who cares about human rights and oppression would be offended in the extreme by what Trump has said. We can all agree about anyone with a conscience should be able to agree on that. But what really sort of stands out for me is that this man is incredibly detached from reality. This is not something that can fly. The former head of Saudi intelligence, just to give you one example, al-Turki, who used to have a very close relationship with the Bush administration and George Bush, a very personal friendship. He went on television in the last 48 hours, and I can't believe that he did this without the approval of the Saudi Crown Prince. Even though he's no longer the head of Saudi intelligence, he speaks with a lot of authority, and he must have had the approval of the Saudi Crown Prince to say this. And what he said was incredibly harsh in terms of what we historically expect from the Saudis. He said that this was a mad ethnic cleansing scheme, that this was a fantasy, and that it was totally unacceptable. If you actually see his body language in the course of this interview, he's, at least outwardly apoplectic about what the Biden administration is proposing to do. The Egyptians and the Jordanians have said categorically that they will not countenance this. Jordan has indicated that it would amount to a declaration of war. Now, I don't trust these people to do what is right by the Palestinians. Nobody should, given their history. But these people do care about their own survival. They care about their own power. They care about their own wealth. And they remember, I'm sure, the assassination of Anwar Sadat, the former Egyptian autocrat who was killed for doing a really what was a traitorous peace deal with the Israelis. They remember the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, and by people who were fed up in Iran with American dominance. And I think they understand that this proposal will likely cause an explosion in West Asia, the likes of which no one will be able to control. And so what this says to me is that you have an administration in Washington that is completely detached from reality. And the last thing I'll say about this is recently Trump gave an interview in which he said that Spain was a member of the BRICS, and he said it with arrogant confidence. This tells you a lot about the ignorance of the man. Maybe he understands or he has a grip on what's going on in the United States. Maybe he kind of gets what's going on in Europe. But in the non-Western world, this man is completely and utterly clueless. And this spells serious, serious trouble for the United States and for the world.
Dimitri, offended in the extreme. I felt it, and I felt angry. I felt embarrassed. I couldn't believe the lies, one after another, that he was telling about the situation there. And as you mentioned, never admitting or acknowledging that it was Israel that has completely demolished and destroyed Gaza. It's been going on for 80, well, whatever it is now, 80, 70, 80 years since 80 years almost since the foundation of Israel. Unbelievable. And I think from what little I've seen, the outcry has not only come from like the Saudis, but other Arab countries and other countries around the world. They could not believe that he said that. Now, Dimitri, what's interesting is the very next day, this cute little, I can't stand her guts, Caroline Levitt, the new press secretary, she's got this presence like she's lecturing people, like she's a schoolgirl, like I mean, I just couldn't believe the way she handled it. But the next day, when she was asked if Trump was really serious about annexing Gaza and a mega development, she said, "Oh, well, that's just Trump. He just says things and it's not." Did you see that press conference? And if you did, what
Yeah.
was your reaction to that?
Well, the most astonishing thing for me about the press conference was when she said, I think we're talking about the same press conference, that um, expecting the Palestinian people to remain in the demolition zone would be evil. She used the word evil. So, again, what planet does she live on? The evil was the destruction of Gaza with Western munitions, not just US bombs, German munitions, British munitions, Canadian munitions. The entire West supported the destruction of Gaza and the rendering of Gaza unlivable. And that is the evil with which we must now deal. At the end of the day, they don't seem to have any either concern or awareness of the fact that the Palestinians themselves, following the implementation of this shaky ceasefire, demonstrated without any hesitation whatsoever their determination to remain. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians marched to the north of Gaza, which had been destroyed to a far greater degree than any other part of Gaza. And along this path, this great march of return to the north of Gaza, one Palestinian after another declared openly their determination to remain, no matter what. They said, we will live amongst the rubble of our homes if we must. We will not leave this land. So Trump believes he's acting in the interests of the Palestinian people, who themselves have made absolutely clear after 15 months of heroic resistance they're not going anywhere. I mean, he's not fooling anybody, Regis. And I have to say, I try to look at the long-term implications of this. There was an interview done of the Russian Federation's ambassador to the United Nations, Nebenza. Mr. Nebenza said, "This is unacceptable. The Palestinian people have suffered enough. We will not tolerate this." Now, how far Russia will go in trying to stop this will be an interesting question. But I ask myself, how did the leaders of West Asia, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, when they hear these words coming out of the mouths of representatives of the Russian Federation, the Chinese government is taking the same position. They're looking at this situation and they're saying, there's now another game in town. That game in town is the BRICS. These people are powerful, they have economic, military might, and they're rational human beings. They have a certain level of basic decency. I would suggest that what Trump is doing is going to potentially cause a massive shift in the geopolitical power of the BRICS nations in West Asia. Because I think that there is a level of frustration and disgust, even amongst the vassals of the United States in the region, that is boiling over. And ultimately, what this may result in is the expulsion of the West and its military forces from the region. I very much hope that that happens in a peaceful manner, because that would be in the best interests of West Asia. They've lived under the yoke of Western oppression for far too long, and now we're watching the ultimate indignity. I can't imagine this isn't going to have long-term implications for the influence of the West in West Asia.
Yeah. You mentioned the BRICS. I agree with you. I think what Trump said and what Netanyahu was all about in that press conference, this has emboldened Russia, China, India, Iran, other countries in the BRICS movement who were threatened by him, directly threatened by him, that if any of them attempted to get rid of the dollar, he would punish them. I mean, this can't be any clearer what Trump's intentions are. He's a megalomaniac. He's acting like a global dictator, like he owns and controls the whole planet. And yet I'm thinking this is going to embolden the rest of these countries and others to join BRICS, because they will see a number of things. They will see that BRICS is really concerned about a new world order, strictly observing international law, strictly observing the principles of the UN Charter, respecting the sovereignty and equality of all nations. Now, when I say equality, I don't mean in terms of money and power and might, but accepting all as equals. And Trump has basically just threatened them. If you do this, I'm going to punish you. What are your thoughts on that?
In a way, I say this with the greatest of respect to our brothers and sisters in West Asia. My primary concern is their well-being and an end to their suffering. But in a strange sort of way, I derive some solace from all of this, because I think that Trump is hastening the demise of Western hegemony. And this is exactly, you can see this even in Canada, which has been a country, arguably the most subservient country in the Western Hemisphere to the dictates of Washington. They're convening now. They just had to deal with this threat of 25% tariffs. The threat has not gone away. They've gotten a 30-day reprieve because Justin Trudeau made some promises about militarizing the border and signing on to the failed war on drugs. So they've convened an economic conference in Canada. They're doing this with all the stakeholders, unions, corporations, business leaders, academics, to as they put it, to Trump-proof the Canadian economy. What are they going to look at? What are the options? The options, in my view, and I've been saying this for years, long before Trump came to power, the primary option which we should be exploring is to intensify and deepen our relationships with the BRICS. That's the sensible thing to do. There was an interesting graphic that I posted recently. A friend brought it to my attention, which shows that Canada and a handful of other Western states are the very few remaining states who trade more with the United States than China. The vast majority of states in the world today trade more with China than they do with the United States. the Western countries that continue to depend disproportionately upon the United States are being pushed into the orbit of the BRICS. That's the sensible thing to do to protect themselves, and it will, at the end of the day, hasten the demise of American hegemony.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have felt now since I've been following the BRICS movement and that incredible conference that they had in Kazan, where a lot of people said nothing important happened. Baloney, 20,000 representatives from many countries around the world, most countries came together and are now beginning to uh, to join together to solidify this movement. Now, you mentioned hastening the demise of the United States and the West. Dimitri, we've talked about it before. And I think that Trump and his MAGA, Make America Great Again, is not only going to hasten the demise of the United States itself, the American people are not going to benefit from this baloney.
No.
They're going to be incredibly hurt by these tariffs, the trade wars, increasing sanctions. You just mentioned more nations now are trading with China than with the United States. Dimitri, I think it is going to hasten the collapse of the entire Western order. For 500 years of imperialism, I think we're seeing it right before our eyes with everything that Trump is doing. And you know, I'm really saddened. I had a friend that sent me a message and she just praised Trump. And we need a strong leader like Trump for America to restore everything we believe in. I couldn't believe it. Dimitri, your thoughts?
Yeah, they should rename this movement the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again. I call it the MAWA movement, Make America Weak Again. That's exactly what Trump is going to do, to the detriment of the people of the United States, sadly, and all of us in the West. Um, what the most likely consequences of these belligerent policies, this naked disregard for the well-being of the so-called allies of the United States, is American isolation. People are going to disconnect from America economically, politically, and militarily. They're being forced to do that. It's not that their leaders want to. They have really no other alternative. And ultimately, the American people will suffer as a result of this, as will all people in the West. An interesting, I've been following the social media commentary in Canada about these tariff threats from the United States. And, the predominant sentiment, all of a sudden, a lot of people in Canada have become nationalists. Well, where were you, 10, 15 years ago when our country was being made increasingly subservient to Washington? Now because we're confronted with tariff threats, they've suddenly become, committed to the sovereignty of the nation. But they're all talking about, how are we going to deal with this problem? And they're saying we should, deepen our trade relationships with Europe and Japan. I got news for you, fellow Canadians. Europe and Japan are in decline. That's not where the future lies. If we try to hitch our wagon to the European wagon, we're going to go down like a ton of bricks. The future lies in the non-Western world. There is a massive distribution of power, wealth, political influence from the West to the East. And if countries in the Western hemisphere are serious about protecting their future, protecting the well-being of their people, preserving their sovereignty, then what they should be doing is developing their relations with the non-Western world, and particularly China and Russia. And that will require, Regis, a radical rethinking of foreign policy in places like Canada and the European Union. Because right now, their attitude towards Russia and China is one of unlimited belligerence. Even today as we speak, despite all that Trump has done since he came into office in January, they continue, the Europeans, for example, we're going to impose more sanctions on Russia. They continue to talk about Russia as the ultimate evil. And if they were serious about protecting the future of their people, they would be doing everything they can to restore relations with Russia, China, other BRICS nations, and recognizing the reality that that is where the future lies. That's just fact. We have to come to terms with that in the West, or we're doomed.
Yeah. Dimitri, you got to get back here as soon as you can. to Russia. You know, in the Russian media that I'm reading, and a lot of the commentary, uh, it's been now for months, maybe close to a year, but it's increased. Even the government in Crimea, all the talk is about developing relations with Africa and India. They're actually introducing a language program into India and several African countries. They're beginning development projects. You, if you study it from this side and you watch what Russia is doing exactly what the United States is not doing. It's developing relations with the African countries, South American countries, Cuba, uh, and that's just never reported in anything I read from, the Western media. But this is what Russia has been doing, and I'd like to say this: I believe that it's President Putin primarily, not President Xi in China, who has been leading the BRICS movement. You see more from Putin and Russia about different sub-organizational entities on all levels, on
Mhm.
culture, on economic development, on technological cooperation, on space, on military. If looking at it from this side is like, oh my God, this is what's really happening. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Russia has a lot of moral authority in Africa because, during the era of the Soviet Union, and Russia was the most significant and powerful Soviet republic within the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union displayed a tremendous amount of support for the anti-colonialist movement in Africa. And so to this very day, there is a lot of respect for Russians. A lot of young Africans were brought to the Soviet Union to study, and to be given a high quality education. The independence movements within Africa were given arms, political support, economic support by the Soviet Union. And I think that the Russian Federation's government is keenly aware of this historical relationship between the Soviets and Africa and is wisely building upon that, building upon the trust that was developed over those decades of support for the anti-colonial movements in Africa, to separate Africa from Western hegemony. This is an inexorable process, Regis, and it's accelerating. There was an interesting statistic I saw that the RT, which has been so vilified in the West, Western observers have noted that it has a tremendous amount of influence in Africa. Not because it's spewing propaganda, but because it has an honest assessment of Western foreign policy. RT is probably, I'd probably, in my view, infinitely more honest about Western foreign policy than any Western media organization is, and that's why it has such a wide following within Africa. So again, wherever you look around the non-Western world, whether you're talking about, Latin America, countries like Venezuela, Cuba, Bolivia, uh, even Peru, I believe, has just announced the opening of a massive Chinese sponsored infrastructure project, a major port. Um, Africa, Southeast Asia, the overall inexorable trend is towards a development and intensification of relations between these countries and the major partners of the BRICS. So those countries in the Western Hemisphere, which are looking for ways to deal with the madness of the Trump administration, they need to get on this bandwagon as quickly as possible, or be left behind, be left in a state of isolation and inexorable weakening, if they continue to hitch their fortunes to Washington.
Dimitri, I was just a participant in a conference on the 5th of February, 2 days ago, that was celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Yalta Conference. and people, there were political scientists there, there were historians there from the Simferopol Federal University, uh, and there were people from think tanks. And so much of the conversation was about Trump and what was happening. And, what I said was, it would really be interesting, folks, is I'm the only American around here that has a considerable amount of knowledge and experience in analyzing what my country's been doing for a long, long time. It would be really good if we could have some kind of a dialogue between us to kind of really balance your understanding of what's happening in the United States. But after this conference, which in these conferences here basically are just reading of papers, and there's no discussion, maybe one question, but that's it. And it's not very productive in terms of creating a dialogue. But afterwards, there was some refreshment, uh, kind of a dinner type things. Everybody was standing, but all the people were in the room. Several people came up to me. Two of them I want to mention, Dimitri, because it it emphasizes what we've just been talking about. A woman came up to me and she said, "Thank you so much." And I did a little video presentation of uh, three veterans from World War II sharing their life experience. It touched many people. And I said, "Well, who are you?" She told me, she said, "Well, I'm the head of the medical department here at Simferopol Federal University." I said, "Medical department?" She says, "Yeah, we have 2,000 foreign students."
Wow. Wow.
Wow, wow is right. And two of her students came up to me. One of them was from Nigeria, big guy. He said, "I've been following you on Substack. I love what you're doing." And I said, "When are you going to graduate?" He said, "I'm going to graduate in a couple of months as a medical doctor," and he's going to go back home. Another young guy from one of the Middle Eastern countries, he came up to me and the same thing. He said, "Thank you so much. I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going back to my country to provide medical services to my country." I can't remember what country he was from. Dimitri,
Mhm.
I knew that Russia was doing a lot, but I've since learned that Russia has been inviting thousands of students from other countries to study at places like Moscow State University, to
Mhm.
study with their diplomatic courses. I mean, on the one hand, I was very happy and proud to hear that, but it was just another example of how deep Russia's commitment has been to reaching out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, Regis, this is a very interesting. I wasn't aware of that. This is very interesting to contrast what you've just described to what's happening in Canada, and I suspect in other Western states as well. Canada for a number of years has been profiting off of international students. They charge them for the privilege of coming and studying at Canadian universities, which frankly are not, by and large, the best universities in the world. We have one or two, world-class universities, but the Canadian education system is not a world leader. Nonetheless, they've been coming here because it is a prosperous country, has been up until now, and they pay exorbitant tuitions. And these exorbitant tuitions have, to a large degree, funded the university system in Canada because public funding has been inadequate. So, in response to this whole trend that's happening across the West, and it's been greatly, promoted by the Trump administration against immigration, the Canadian government, the Trudeau government, recently decided to cut back dramatically on the number of visas that are given to international students. And this has actually caused a financial crisis in the Canadian university system because they'd become so reliant upon these exorbitant, tuitions that international students were paying. A sensible country, one that has, particularly one that has wealth, that has the ability to fund publicly a world-class educational system, as Canada does, would be inviting students from the non-Western world to come and study here for low tuitions, not exorbitant tuitions, to develop relations with the future leaders of these countries, and to establish a diplomatic relation, to get to know their cultures better, their societies better, and enable them to get to know our cultures and our societies better. It strikes me, based on what you're telling me, that is very much the policy that the Russian Federation is pursuing. I suspect other BRICS countries are following that policy as well. Here in Canada and other Western countries, we're going in the opposite direction. We are cutting off or diminishing our contacts with the future leaders of countries in the non-Western world.
Well, Dimitri, once again, another very interesting and informative conversation. I really do appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, but we're going to have to keep an eye on everything that's going to start unfolding with this MAGA or MAWA, as you have stated, make America weak again, because as you said, with Trump, there's nothing hidden. There's no attempt to hide anything or to fool people. He's just putting it right out there finally. And so I'll look forward to keeping track with this in the future with you. And I will continue to promote your Substack and your YouTube channel. It's awesome. And I recommend everyone to start following Dimitri Lascaris. Thank you, my friend.
And I hope to see you in Crimea in the next few months. I'm planning to come to.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.